Hello, everybody. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. So let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, and certainly many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. It's so easy that even I can do it. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So you can download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Go ahead and do it. Do it. Please. I beg of you. Human life and dignity depends on it. Please.
Well, my name is Scott Ernest. Oh, there we go.
All right. Reintroduce yourself then.
My name is Scott Ernest. I am a former white nationalist. I left the movement in 2016, basically July of 2016. So, it's been several years. I helped co-found a organization called Hands of Air that is dedicated to getting other white nationalists out of the movement. We kind of specialize in LGBTQ formers, and we also kind of specialize in pagans and heathens and stuff. But we accept everybody. The pretty much most of those that we've actually helped so far are actually weren't LGBT or pagans or heathens. So, just because we kind of specialize in something doesn't mean that's all we deal with. I've also worked alongside Christian Picciolini, who co-founded Life After Hate and also founded Free Radicals Project. He moved on from Life After Hate, and he's actually closed down Free Radicals Project. He also is well known for having a show called Breaking Hate on MSNBC.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of the current me, at least.
Sure. So, I guess I'm interested in how you got into the whole thing because, how you originally got involved in that. Because I think a lot of us have, if not racist, have some prejudices, right? So I'm wondering,
most people do, yes.
To what extent was that originally there, or was there something that kind of brought that to you?
Well, I mean, I'm in my 40s, and back when those of us that are around this age were young, there was always a little bit of problematic behavior, whether it was casually dropping a homophobic slur, or even casually dropping racism, and often you would excuse it because growing up, I had friends, various races and ethnicities, and I would be around them, and they would drop it, so I would drop the slur too. So you kind of get that way, but prior to being a white nationalist, I didn't take it very far. It was basically just, I hate to use the term, it was just kids being kids. I went into the white nationalist movement in my 20s, and just from there, it just got worse and worse and worse, and I started going down that rabbit hole. And
were you sort of vulnerable in some way? Were you especially vulnerable? Because I know when cults often find people, they know how to exploit their weaknesses. And also I'm wondering, not to get too deeply personable, what was there any trouble at home or anything like that kind of?
There's no questions. There's no questions that are out of line, by the way.
Okay.
Pretty much anything goes. There was no troubles at home or anything. Uneventful childhood. Dad was a slightly abusive person, but he was mostly just an asshole. Definitely my childhood could have been far worse. Was I susceptible to being recruited? Absolutely. I am a heathen.
It happened. It
my
happened.
oh yeah, my religion is a Satru or heathenry or Odinism, however you want to call it. And there's a lot of heathens in the movement, usually folkish heathens. They, you because a lot of the symbols in heathenry and stuff get used by white nationalists and stuff like that. It's very easy to
Yeah,
cross that line and go from, just somebody that loves, you know, Scandinavia and
yeah,
mythology and all of that. It's easy to cross that line and get recruited and then just go down that rabbit hole. And that's kind of what happened to me. Although my entrance into the movement was different. I was one time just surfing the internet, and it was 2004. I don't remember what I was searching for. It's not like the internet we had a whole lot back then.
yeah, yeah,
But I was searching the internet and I ran across this blog where this guy, he went by the name Yama Mama something, but basically for short, it was Yama. He was a self-described Antifa, and he was basically threatening to send people to rape two 12-year-old girls that had the band Prussian Blue. And he was specifically looking for black guys to find their house and rape them, and he was putting a map to their house and everything. And
oh yeah, that
go
would
ahead.
be messed up for sure.
Oh yeah, I objected to it. I called the FBI, and they kind of shrugged it off. But what they did say was, "Why don't you make sure the parents know?" Well, I ended up finding out the parents' names and got a hold of them and let them know what was going on. And I ended up talking with them and becoming a friend of the family, and kind of my start. At first, for the first 2 or 3 years of knowing them, I didn't really consider myself a white nationalist. I didn't get involved in any of that, but they made me a moderator on their daughter's kind of fan forum.
Yeah,
And, my job was basically to keep porn off the site because it was 12-year-old girls.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a racist ban at the time, but they were 12-year-old girls. And it just bloomed from there. They recommended I join Stormfront, which I did, and history.
So it's sort of a unique way of getting into that.
Yeah, in some ways, I was trying to do good and got involved because, well, law enforcement told me to, let the parents know.
Yeah.
So that's not an excuse,
No,
that would be a horrible excuse if I was using it as an excuse.
yeah.
So,
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Scandinavia because I am a Finnish American with
mhm.
some Swedish in there, and as sort of an interesting point, at one point in history in Minnesota, they were actually trying to make it so that Finns could be kicked out of the United States under the Chinese Exclusion Act. So
Mhm.
I've always found that very strange because to me it shows that if they're not going to go after people with darker skin like the racist, they're going to go after white people.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Um,
they to this day they do. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
they couch it in, oh, it's the liberals, but
yeah, yeah,
that's what they do. And yeah, Finns always have a soft spot in my heart. By the way, I'm from Michigan too, but I'm from the
yeah.
lower peninsula. I am half Swedish, half Bavarian.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
they called Finns China Swedes even, which is
and then there's the Irish
thing.
too. The
Yeah,
Irish always got it.
yeah,
And to this day, in white nationalism, there are those that consider themselves Nordicists. Nordicists tend to believe that only those that are Nordic, are the true white people. And
hmm.
then you have people that are Mediterranean, or even say, you know, there's there's groups of them called Pan-Aryans that
Yeah.
they also include like Iranians and other Middle Easterners
Oh
that are
yeah, that's another thing I wanted to get into because like people like Michelle Malkin and Nick Fuentes and others, they are basically 100% aligned with the white nationalist movement,
Hmm.
yet they're obviously not white people.
I mean,
It's
we have we had stormfronters that were black. We had stormfronters that were Japanese.
yeah,
There
that's
were Mongolians even. You know.
that's 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 definitely an interesting aspect of it. And
Hmm.
there were also actual Jewish Nazis, which is like not just neo Nazis, but during the actual Nazi Germany thing. So
Josh Mandel
yeah,
in Pennsylvania, I believe, or is
yeah.
it Ohio?
But
Maybe
also,
Ohio.
also in Hitler's actual system, they
Hmm.
had like I don't remember name because I'm terrible with names, so I don't remember actual names of people, but I did look into that. I did my own research, so to speak, to use that much hated term.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people out there. It's very much a self hate sort of scenario. Uh,
Yeah,
you know, they want to be welcomed with open arms. I hate to break it to them, knowing the white nationalist movement, they're
yeah.
not really all
Well,
that well.
I mean, they're obviously being used. It's a,
Oh, yeah.
and then there's an element of being a grifter too. As
Mhm.
I mean, I kind of hate the word grifter. I think it's overused, but nevertheless, I think it still applies.
There is a lot of money in far right politics. So if
Yeah,
you're somebody like, say, Candace Owens,
yeah,
you can make a lot of money because there's millionaires and billionaires with unlimited funds that don't care if you waste their money as long as the message is getting out. And especially if you kind of turn on your own, so to speak.
yeah. There's definitely less money in leftist politics. In
Mhm.
fact, one of my favorite leftist figures of all time is Kropotkin, who was a. I don't know if you've heard of him. Have you?
Mm-mm.
He was a,
I'm personally not really a leftist myself, so I don't really
yeah.
know a whole lot.
Well, he
So
was. I mean, I'll just explain it like this. He was born a Russian prince, very, very privileged position and everything, but he renounced it to become a revolutionary anarchist.
oh, interesting.
And I mean, how many people have that kind of history?
Well,
You
I
got
am a
like even
libertarian,
if
so
you
that is right up
disagree
my
with his
alley too.
politics, even if you disagree with his politics, you got to admit that's ballsy.
Yeah,
Like, there's nobody else in history who did something like
definitely.
that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions?
oh, well, like when I was in high school, my dad was like threatening to go on shooting sprees and stuff like that. So I look back at that, like being around the craziness and the violence, but I also know that he was like I saw him at his best as well. So I very much see this Jekyll and Hyde thing, and that kind of gives me a unique perspective when it comes to, I guess a lot of different things in life because I mean, he was an alcoholic, bipolar Vietnam vet,
Hmm.
and but I also knew him to be a good guy at times. So he's either like the worst kind of person or like one of the best. It was strange. So I'm wondering, like, how much of that do you see, or have you seen in your whole story?
From what I can really say is being in the movement as long as I was, getting to know white nationalists, there's very few with any redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Okay.
You don't really go in and see people that might be bad, but you might see them at their best. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not really a thing.
So there are a lot of like narcissists.
There's a lot
Uh,
of narcissists, but it's
yeah.
a lot of also just people that are have such horrible personalities that nobody wants to be around them, and they just basically kind of embrace it. You
Kind of
know,
like Karens, I guess.
an example would be April Gady. April Gady was the mother of those two girls
Yeah.
that and was the one basically that recruited me. One time we went to a festival in Whitefish, Montana, and this was a couple of years after I came to the PLE, and I had kind of taken over recruiting, and so I was the one that kind of started vetting people and stuff like that.
Yes.
Well, April is definitely a handful. she's not as bad as a lot of people would say. She's actually very much more normal than you might expect from her.
Yeah.
That being said, at this festival, there was this guy. He was a really interesting guy. He was from a family that were some of the Chinese people that worked on the railroad through Montana,
Yeah.
and so he was very much a cowboy of Chinese origin, and he was very interesting to talk to. But he also sold ovens, and when we went over to talk with them, we were chit chatting with them, and then the next thing you know, April just out of the blue asked them, "So how many people can fit in the ovens?"
Oh man, that's terrible.
I mean, and
Oh,
everybody else that we were with just got a crack. They just cracking up over it, and I'm just face palming like, why? And that's the kind of situation you're kind of in, where even the ones that are somewhat more normal than the rest,
there's
it
still something wrong with them because there was no reason. There was obviously no reason to ask that question.
not at all,
No,
absolutely not. I
no
immediately, the
good
minute
reason.
she said that, I kind of just tuned out and went off in my own way. And
Yeah,
I don't think I stayed at the festival very much longer after that, because it was just, you know, when I went into the movement, and especially when I ended up going up to Montana and joining the it's Pioneer Little Europe. Kalispell was the group I was a part of. When I joined that group, my goal was to have a community, not a fringe, we're gonna be kooks community, but I wanted
yeah,
a community where we could go out in Glacier National Park, have fun, go to festivals, go paddleboarding on Flathead Lake, actually do fun things. But white nationalists, of course, they just want negativity. And
yeah,
one thing I learned while I was the person that vet people was everybody that I talked to almost was horrible. It was just every conversation I had with a white nationalist made me really despise white nationalists. And
yeah.
what I unfortunately I'm somebody that on Facebook, I was a Facebook friend of Anders Breivik over in Norway,
Oh
who
man,
murdered a bunch of kids.
yeah,
And I first time I ever flipped out when I was in the movement was when he did his murdering spree, and it was my first ban on Stormfront ever, and I was a mod at the time when I was banned too. Uh, my issue on Stormfront was the fact that Stormfront was hiding the support that Anders Breivik had
yeah,
by just deleting posts, but they weren't banning the people making the posts. So I would be like, why are we allowing these psychopaths to stay here? But that's easily answered with it's white nationalists.
yeah. They
So I
are
started.
they are psychopathic in some sense.
They are.
Yeah,
I started using that when I was in the PLE. Anytime I'd meet somebody, what was your opinion of what Anders Breivik did? Oh well, he killed commies, so it doesn't matter. And I'd be
yeah,
like, they were children. Oh, but they were communist children. It's like,
yeah,
you do realize that children can grow up and change. You
yeah.
know, no, they're like, no,
Well,
but they were communists now, so they deserve to
also
be.
like think about it this way: like, what would be their main critique of communism is that it would be violently imposing a certain way of life on people. Well, how is that any different from what?
Well, they wouldn't. Most white nationalists would never think of that.
Yeah,
Um, and so
that's very strange that that thought wouldn't even enter somebody's head.
I would even ask them though. I'd be like, so what happens if the child of a fellow PLE member went communist in order to get back at mom and dad?
Yeah,
Oh, well, if the parents didn't do something about it, I would. I was like, what do you mean? You're going to be violent towards their child? If I had to. And it's like, no, get out of town. Don't ever come back. I want nothing of you.
yeah,
But and that type of conversation was so common. It's not a surprise that I left.
yeah,
And my eventually I got to the point where I didn't want to recruit anymore. I didn't want to vet anymore. I told April I'm not doing this anymore. So she started just recruiting people willy nilly, and she brought David Lenio from who was the son of a one of the top lawyers in Grand Rapids. She actually recruited him to Montana, and next thing I know, he's being arrested for threatening to shoot local school kids.
Yeah. And
So that was
that's kind of what inspired you to leave.
that was when I left.
Yeah.
I couldn't have anything to do with it anymore. He also threatened to shoot the kids of Jonathan Hudson, who at the time was the communication director of the Brady campaign. I ended up meeting John Hudson. We're friends to this day. And a big reason I met him. Was because, his kids had been threatened too. And I was like, I bet nobody's ever apologized to you. But you know what? I apologize that you've had to deal with this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it's kind of been. When I left the movement, I originally left quietly. I wasn't really changing very much politically, but, just basically withdrawing from the movement as a whole. And then, of course, the Whitefish Troll Storm happened, which was the Daily Stormer website going after a Jewish family in Whitefish, the town I had just mentioned. And that's kind of what got me to kind of turn on my former associates.
Yes. So I'm trying to think if there's any other questions I've got. I guess
when I ramble a lot, and when I ramble, I
that's all right.
Answer almost every question that people.
That's all right. No, I mean that's good. I mean it's you kind of answered a lot of questions that I might have asked. Let's see. Is there anything else? Well, I mean, oh yeah, I do have one more point to address at least.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on guilt by association? Because I've got a bit of an anecdotal story here. Back when I was doing, physical artwork rather than music, I guess that's still physical in a way, but like drawings and paintings. I had an art show, and it turns out that the person was a bit of a QAnon type of person, having some kind of slightly hidden anti-Semitic messages on Facebook and whatnot. And I didn't learn that until after. And if somebody had caught wind of that, they might think, oh, this Wade guy is like a QAnon person or whatever. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't really see guilt by association as a thing necessarily. Now,
Okay.
If you're going out with the QAnon guy, and let's say he's with you and he's spewing the QAnon stuff out in public, and you're just nodding along or something like that, that would be one thing.
Yeah.
But when we work with Hands of Air, we don't even require people to necessarily change politically. All we really require is that they disengage from the movement. They may still be, a little bit racist. They may still be, however they are, but as long as they're not spreading it on the internet, whatever. It takes time to change. So people aren't going to change automatically. And so a lot of times, even now, I will talk to people that are still in the movement. For example, April Gady, although she's not really in the movement for because she figured out it was anti-woman, but she's still racist and all this, and I still talk to her. I care about her family, and it is what it is. There's a big difference between being loosely associated with somebody like the QAnon guy through your
it was a she.
There's still a big difference between being associated with her through art than basically being associated with her beliefs.
Sure.
So, I don't necessarily go for now. If you get on stage with them and stuff like that, that's obviously that would be
Well, I guess that about does it for my questions that I can think of offhand. I think we did get a fair amount of material here, so I would like to thank you for being my guest here, and you'd be welcome back at some point if you want.
Anytime you find anything, maybe you think some questions later or anything.
Sure, absolutely. Or we could just talk about whatever. It doesn't have to be about this heavy stuff all the time.
Oh yeah, I get so much of that daily that yeah, it's good to
Yeah.
have different
I'm
sides.
sure it can be like overwhelming. Like, so if you ever want to like just talk about music or something like that, or movies or whatever, it doesn't have to always be like politics, because this little podcast of mine is supposed to be multifaceted. I'm supposed to be branching out in all kinds of different things. So,
Okay. Well,
well,
anytime you want me on, just let me know.
okay,
You've
all
got
right. Well,
my information.
well, you have a good day. Yeah.
I had a great time. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.